I don't see how you could possibly do that.
Well, I Googled it, actually.
Nothing like being in a plane, trying to land, and then listening to your air traffic controller tell you that they got their answer from Googling it. Imagine the face of passengers if I made some announcement saying, hey, we got this problem trying to work out here, but don't worry, I've Googled it, and I've got it all worked out. I can only imagine what they'd be thinking. Here's the full audio.
Cherokee 65 Charlie, there's traffic on the parallel. The traffic you're phone's inside of Highway 380 at Cherokee on final for 18 left.
We're looking for that traffic to follow for 65 Charlie, and if we could plan on the next one, possible, we could get a short approach in, we'd appreciate it.
Cherokee 65 Charlie, heavy request. Your traffic's out a half-mile final now.
You've got him inside, 65 Charlie.
Cherokee 65 Charlie, give him room. He's a full stop, 18 left, cleared option.
18 left, cleared option, we'll give him room, 65 Charlie.
Just so you understand what's going on, because these are kind of words that you wouldn't really normally understand unless you were a pilot, this controller is basically saying this. We're talking about 65 Charlie, which is this plane right here. And all this is happening at Denton in the great state of Texas. But the plane to focus on is 65 Charlie. The controller says there's another plane on the parallel. 65 Charlie is landing on 18 left, so that puts them on the 18 right side. They're basically saying that there's another plane landing on 18 right, so it gives them what to look out for them. And then she mentioned that there was a plane lined up ahead of them on 18 left. Essentially what she's doing is telling them, hey, there's two planes you need to be paying attention to. One that's landing on a different runway, so don't freak out when you turn and see them, and another plane which you're following. And she mentioned cleared for the option. The option basically means you can land or you can do a touch and go. There's just two options. Normally when you're flying a commercial plane at a commercial airport, if you've heard those audios before, you normally just hear cleared to land. There's no option. You're landing. If you mess up and do a go around, that's fine, but this is like, it's more expected. You aren't going to be landing your 747. You're like, you know what, let's do one more time and hit the button and go back up again. That's not what they're planning. And they're going to ask you why you did a go around. If your answer was like, I just thought I'd get one more in before I went on my days off, they're not going to like that. In smaller airports, you will hear pilots make requests like this one.
Possible, we could get a short approach in, we'd appreciate it.
I'm not going to explain what this short approach is quite yet, but it's different from a normal approach. It's kind of like this fad, like short king. You're just short. Not everybody's a king and a queen. I'm just a normal guy. I happen to be 6 foot. I'm not a skinny king. I'm just a normal guy. There's this amount of these titles, kings and queens. Not everybody can be a king and a queen. You can just be a normal dude like me, Kelsey, with a girl's name. So stop it with that. You sound ridiculous. Here's what happens next.
All right, short approach approved, clear touch and go, 18 left, thanks, 65 Charlie.
That's a 2 Bravo Tango, or November 65 Charlie. You should return to your base before you hit the approach end of the runway. You're outside the airport traffic area.
We're on about a quarter-mile final, ma'am. Base.
Yeah, no, you should be inside the airport. You should have turned your base up even the numbers.
We can't do that and land on the 1,000-footers.
Well, that's what a short approach is.
I think you know the direction of where this video is going, but these pilots in the 65 Charlie are here. They're on a base leg, meaning they're facing 90 degrees from the final approach course of the runway. And they're about 1/4 of a mile away from the runway, which in perspective is very close. To give you an idea, on my plane, I'm maybe like 6 or 10 miles when I get lined up on the runway. A 1/4 mile probably would never work on my plane. I guess like in a fire situation, I could give it a go, but it'd be very close to the runway, even on a smaller plane like this. So they're keeping it in very tight. I would call that a short approach. The controller believes that the pilot should be here and lined up with the numbers, which are the numbers that you see at the start of all the runway. Listen to what she says right here.
Yeah, no, you should be inside the airport. You should have turned your base up even the numbers.
The problem is that these pilots are doing a maneuver which is to simulate an engine failure. And it basically demonstrates to the examiner or to the instructor or whoever that you as a pilot have good energy management. You know when to nose the plane over to get down and how to handle your energy to safely get in and land where you need to land. So these pilots keeping it a 1/4 mile means they're very close to the runway, and in a worst case scenario could just dive over to get onto the runway. But this controller is thinking that they should be over the runway. The problem is when you do this maneuver, it is to verify that you have good energy management, which means you have to pick a place on the runway in which you need to land. Because if you have bad energy management, you could end up floating really far down the runway or missing and landing short of the runway, which is another problem. So you have to pick a place, and what most pilots do in this situation is they pick these. These here are the 1,000-foot markers that are on just about every runway. and that's why he says this.
We can't do that and land on the 1,000-footers.
That's a target area of all planes. When I'm flying my plane, I try to land on the 1,000-foot markers. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but that's a target area. And so when you're doing your examinations, that's basically what you're trying to do. You're trying to hit those markers, those 1,000-foot markers, and that gives you a little bit of protection behind you so you don't land short of the runway, but it also doesn't give you the total length of the runway where you go, I'll just land whatever I want, because I'm sure back in the day, the runways didn't have these markings, and there was somebody who was like, well, I'll just land here at the end of the runway, and they didn't have enough distance to stop, and then there was a problem. So now we have 1,000-foot markers. That's where you're supposed to land, and that's how it works. Obviously, they have different definitions, so listen to what she says.
I'm sorry, I guess we need to come up with something different, because in order to complete a commercial check ride, we've got to do what's called a power-off 180.
Well, then,
pull the power of beam where you want to touch down and have to land on that point and no more than 200 beyond it.
that's fine, but don't ask for a short approach if you're going to do a power-off 180. That's my point.
Well, okay, I will remember that from now on, no problem.
Yeah, when you ask for a short approach, I expect you to turn your base to beam the numbers.
All right, this will be a full stop for 65 Charlie, and maybe we need to talk about that some more, because you're the first controller in 15 years that's ever said that.
Now, what should happen at this point is the controller should say, yeah, cool, no worries. Just go ahead and once you land, let me know when you're done doing your flight for the day, your flight training or whatever's going on, and I'll give you a number so we can talk about it. It's not a big deal. The reason I say not a big deal, things like that, is because if you tell the pilots like, hey, you're in trouble, then they're going to be really anxious and they can make a mistake, which is not necessary because it's not like a violation thing. So that should be what happens here. I'm hoping that what happens is that they don't escalate it and they start fighting like you've seen in some of the videos with air traffic control, and the pilots start going like, oh, I have a bigger plane. No, I have a bigger plane. There's a different word I want to use, but you get what I'm saying.
Well, I'm just, if you ask for a short approach is when you turn your base to mean the numbers. If I know you're a student asking for a short approach, I know you're out there practicing and you probably will extend. But if you're doing something other than a short approach, don't ask for a short approach.
Well, I will definitely look up the definition of short approach, because I've never seen where it says you turn base a beam the numbers, because I don't see how you could possibly do that.
Well, I Googled it, actually. I Googled short approach, and it said to turn your base a beam or before the numbers, and you will land probably touchdown around midfield.
First things first, there is no one maneuver for a student pilot and another maneuver for somebody else. There's just one maneuver. It's a, hey, we're all speaking the same language. Like she said, there's traffic on the parallel. That doesn't mean if you're a student pilot, you can just like blow in and fly really close to them. Oh, it's fine, you're a student pilot. But if you're a commercial pilot, you can't go over there. That's not how it works. You have to have everybody on the same page. So we have this common language that we use in aviation, and terms and terminology, and that's why they have this ICAO standardization, and I harp on that, especially with my airline, with pilots that I'm flying with, because the places that we flying, English isn't their first language. So if you're using slang that you'll hear in the US, and regional pilots do it, and I was guilty of this too, sometimes you'll use this slang and you get into this habit of it, and then you go to an airline that's doing international flying, and now you're going over to other places in the country and you're saying like in the box and 4 to run and 2 for 4, and you're saying these types of things, and the controller in China is like, what is this guy even saying? It doesn't make any sense. So the standardization is really important. So she's saying like, oh, if you're a student, it would be this, and that doesn't make any sense. Here's the other thing. You can Google whatever you want, but you have to realize the source of where the information is coming from. So I use Google even with aviation stuff. I will Google it and it will give you a bunch of different sources of information. You got to pick the right one. You can't just get on there and then use Reddit and go like, oh, some guy on Reddit told me this is how it works. That doesn't work. It's the same thing. I had someone recently text me and ask me something about my height. They said, are you 5'10"? I thought you were 6 foot. And I was like, you've seen me a bunch of times. Why are you asking how tall I am? Yeah, I'm 6 feet. Why? Well, they had somehow scrolled and found this thing about me on Google, which I'd never seen before. I wasn't born in Dallas. I wasn't raised there. I do live in Texas, though. And then there was even more stuff that was really strange as I scrolled down, like this. I never got paid to do an ad for chocolate milk. I'm just a 7-year-old stuck in this grown man's body, flying airplanes, and I love chocolate milk like a 7-year-old. That's all that is. And then on this stuff, I'm 6 feet tall. I'm more like probably 77 kilos. And I have no idea what my measurements are because I have yet to be invited to the Victoria's Secret fashion show. I don't know why, but I'm sure the invite got lost in the mail. But this was the weirdest thing that I saw when I looked at this thing when I Googled myself, that I have a dress size. Now what I do on my own time is really none of anybody's business. And I don't know what my dress size is. I'm not sure if 8's like a good one or a bad one. I think it means like not a good one, but then I didn't really know. And do men have different dress sizes like women, like shoes? I don't know. It also said my shoe size was 9, which I don't even know where they would get this information, but it doesn't really matter. My point is you go to get your information, you got to look at your source. And so when I went to Google and find information about the short approach, what I did is I pulled up something on the FAA website. And the reason I would do that is because when an FAA inspector or somebody comes in and they want to argue with me about something like, hey, I did a short approach, or I told these pilots they needed to do a short approach, and this is my reference point on why I think they need to turn in over the numbers. This is on the FAA website, and so great. That would be my strategy. Here's what it actually says on the FAA website. It basically just says, listed as make a short final approach. The final approach segment is that straight in shot as you're coming in to land. It just says short. Now that's all relative. Like if I made a short final approach on a 747, it would be different than if I made one in a small plane. And I actually have a video of me doing a short approach in a small plane back right before I flew that video with Stella, where I took her up flying. We were flying and I had to get checked out on that plane because I'd never flown it before, and I recorded the whole thing. I just never released it to everybody. And in there I kept saying, which you're not going to see the whole video because it was like an hour and a half flight that we did, but I kept saying like, man, I wish we could do a short approach, because I think I did like 3 or 4 landings. I said, I wish I could do a short approach because doing these long approaches is what I wanted to do in flight school, because I wanted to get stable and coordinated and lined up for the runway. But now I'm just out flying for fun, so I don't have to follow the profile. So when you're going through flight school, everything feels like the plane is moving really fast. This plane is probably landing at like 70, not 75, I don't remember, but that's like half the speed of what I'm used to landing at. So for me, it was all going really, really slow. And so I thought, wow, short approach, that would be fun to do. So I kept saying that, hey, I really wish the controllers would give us this short approach. And finally, they said this.
Number 5 Whiskey Tango, make short approach, runway 29 left, clear to land.
Now you can see roughly where we are because I had a camera mounted on the wing as well. You can see roughly where we are, where we get cleared for this short approach. And I realized that we're high, so I pulled the power back. I dumped all the flaps and then just started to cut it in tight. I got really focused, and I guess that's my focus face. I don't know, I don't ever watch myself fly normally. But you could see on that outside shot, we weren't anywhere near over the numbers. As soon as we got cleared for that short approach, if we had to be over the numbers, then they would have said, you're too far past to be cleared for a short approach. We were like probably right abeam the numbers, right roughly, when that call came in. So as soon as I did that, pull the power back and let's just dump everything, get the flaps, get slow, and we call it getting dirty. So you get slow, get dirty, and just start bringing it in. That's what I did. And then, of course, I know you're going to wonder, how is my landing? Jean gave me one of these.
Nice. Orange Tower, stay type landing.
Nice.
Which really not too bad for a guy who is used to landing 3 stories up in the air. It is so uncomfortable. I know it sounds weird, but to keep getting so low to the ground, I'm so used to having the sight picture of being really high in the air. So we kept going lower and lower and lower and lower. And I kept thinking like, oh my gosh, this plane is going to pound into the ground. But if you ever have the chance, if you're ever there in Torrance and you're planning to go to flight school, if you get a chance to fly with that guy, he is a spectacular pilot, really fun to fly with. And it was fun because we were getting to trade stories about general aviation, which if you had a general aviation guy, this guy is amazing. He knows so much more about general aviation stuff than I will ever know, and mechanical engineering and all that stuff. So we were talking about that. And then of course, you know, those guys have questions about 747s and some of the commercial stuff. So we were talking about why some of the habits I have, I'm doing, which they don't really teach that in flight school. Like some of my habits of being an airline pilot were coming out, which aren't showing up, or they aren't really teaching in the flight school. And he was like, well, why do you try to get the nose on the ground so quickly? Or why are you doing this? And it's just, those are the habits that I pick up from the airline. but the GA guys don't do that because, for example, keeping your nose off the ground and letting it come down really slow like that, it can make your landing better. But on a commercial plane, you want to get your nose down. You don't want to slam it down, but you want to get that nose down quickly. So it was really fun to fly with him and have that discussion. So my point is if you had to talk to somebody about general aviation questions, this guy would be a great guy to talk to. You wouldn't go to Google and Google that stuff, find some random guy on TikTok who's talking about how to get out of a plane that's on fire and then go, yeah, that's a good source. So the source of your information is really important. I think people have lost that nowadays. They use celebrities to tell them who to vote for and what product to buy and things like that. You have to choose the source of the information and be aware of where that information is coming from, and is that person biased? Why are they saying this is a good product to buy? Well, maybe they own the company. So my point is check the source of the information. Don't listen to an air traffic controller and say, well, this air traffic controller, one air traffic controller told me this thing, now that is gospel. That's not the way it works. One celebrity tells you something, oh, well then that's who I should vote for. Don't listen to that. Do your own research and listen to the source and look at the source of the information. That's my whole point on this. Now, here's how this whole thing ends.
Okay, well, then I apologize for requesting the wrong thing because everywhere else, short approach means power off 180, but that's definitely not what it means here.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's because I've worked at different airports. I don't know. But just ask for what you need so I know what you want to do so I can accommodate.
I will most definitely do that. It's just most controllers don't know what a power off 180 is.
Can you call me when you get to the phone? Because I just got a question I want to ask you.
Absolutely.
I appreciate that. Thanks.
I'm so glad that it ended off like that on a really positive note. I think it would have been better that they had that, hey, will you give me a call later, earlier on, because this guy's out flying. I don't know if he's giving the check ride or he's training somebody for check ride. I don't really know. They've been flying GA, I guess, for 15 years, so that's a long time. It could be an examiner, but I'm not sure if he's exactly what's going on there. But that conversation of give me a call should have happened earlier, because that controller now is focused on them while they have 2 runways going. This guy's trying to safely fly their plane. You know, there's a lot that's happening, but it was a really positive way to end that off, right? They could have just started flexing on each other about like, no, this is the rule, and this guy's flying a plane, so he's not going to get out his book. So there's this big book called the FAR-AM. It's like all the rules and all the regulations. He's not going to get that out and start reading it while he's flying to try to like prove his point. The time to do that is afterwards. Land the plane, give him a call. Hey, look, based off of this thing that I found on the FAA website, it says short final approach. Nothing about going over the numbers and landing in the middle of the runway, which when she said that, that sounded really sus to me, suspicious, because FAA is typically not going to tell you to land in the middle of the runway, because if you do that and then you go skidding off the end of the runway, you're going to say, hey, the FAA has told me that I was supposed to be doing this maneuver and landing in the middle of the runway, and the runway's only 3,000 feet long, and so I ended up in the dirt. That's typically not what you're going to hear from the FAA. They're going to especially go on the side of safety and say something like, make a short final segment, short final approach, and then it's up to you to do it correctly. You do it wrong, they go, that wasn't a short final approach, you cut over the numbers, or that's not a short approach, you went 10 miles out. They kind of leave enough leash out there so if you do something wrong, they can go, you did it wrong. But I've never seen anything about landing in the middle of the runway. That's never a good plan. I look forward to hearing from you. Until then, keep the blue side up.